Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by an enchanted forest, lived a little girl named Grace. She had golden curls that bounced with every step and eyes that sparkled like the morning dew. Grace was a joyful child, but her life had been touched by sorrow at a very young age. When Grace was just 5 years old, her mother fell ill and passed away. Her mother had been the heart of their home, a kind and gentle soul who filled their days with laughter and love. Grace's father, Mr. Daniels, was a hard-working man who adored his daughter, but he struggled to fill the void left by his wife's death. As the years went by, Mr. Daniels did his best to raise Grace on his own. He worked long hours at the local mill to provide for her, and although he was often tired, he always made time for his daughter. They had a routine. Each evening, Mr. Daniels would read Grace a bedtime story, and they would talk about their day. Grace cherished these moments, as they reminded her of the warmth and love her mother had always provided. When Grace turned 8, her father decided it was time to bring someone new into their lives. He had met a woman named Serafina, who lived in a neighboring village. She was beautiful, with long dark hair and striking green eyes that seemed to see right through you. Mr. Daniels hoped that Serafina could bring happiness back into their home and help raise Grace. Grace was excited at the prospect of having a new mother, but when she met Serafina, something felt off. There was an air of mystery about the woman, and Grace couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. From the very first day, Grace noticed strange things about Serafina. She moved with an eerie grace, almost gliding rather than walking. Her eyes, though beautiful, had a cold reptilian quality that sent shivers down Grace's spine. Serafina's smile never quite reached her eyes, and Grace couldn't help but feel uneasy around her. One evening, as Grace was playing in the garden, she saw Serafina standing near the edge of the forest. Serafina seemed to be whispering to the trees, her hands moving in strange serpentine patterns. Grace watched in silence, her heart pounding. When Serafina turned and caught her gaze, Grace quickly looked away and pretended to be busy with her toys. "Grace, darling," Serafina called out, her voice smooth and melodious. "What are you doing out here all alone?" Grace swallowed her fear and looked up, forcing a smile. "Just playing, Serafina." Serafina's eyes narrowed slightly, but she maintained her sweet tone. "Well, it's getting late. Time to come inside." Grace nodded and hurried back to the house, her mind racing. She couldn't help but wonder what Serafina had been doing in the forest. As the days passed, Grace's unease grew. Serafina seemed to have a strange influence over Mr. Daniels. He became more distant, his once warm and affectionate demeanor replaced by a cold detachment. Grace felt as though she was losing her father too. One night, unable to sleep, Grace decided to take a walk around the house. She crept down the hallway, careful not to make any noise. As she passed Serafina's room, she heard strange hissing sounds coming from inside. Her curiosity got the better of her, and she gently pushed the door open a crack. What she saw made her heart stop. Serafina was standing in front of a mirror, her eyes glowing a bright, unnatural green. Her reflection in the mirror was not that of a woman, but of a monstrous serpent. Her skin was covered in scales, and her hands had transformed into clawed, reptilian appendages. Grace gasped, and Serafina's head snapped toward the door. Grace quickly pulled the door shut and ran back to her room, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew now that Serafina was not human, but she had no idea how to convince her father. The next morning, Grace found her father in the kitchen, sipping his coffee. She took a deep breath and approached him. "Daddy, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. Mr. Daniels looked up, concern etched on his face. "What is it, sweetheart?" "It's about Serafina. There's something wrong with her." "She's not who she says she is," Grace said, struggling to find the right words. Mr. Daniels frowned. "Grace, what are you talking about?" "Last night, I saw her. She was in her room, and she looked like a snake. Her eyes were glowing and she had scales," Grace explained, her voice shaking with fear. Mr. Daniels sighed and set his coffee cup down. "Grace, you must have had a bad dream. Serafina is a wonderful woman, and she's been very kind to us." "But Daddy, I know what I saw," Grace insisted, her eyes pleading with him to believe her. Mr. Daniels shook his head. "Grace, you're just a child. Sometimes our imaginations can run wild. I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense." Grace felt her heart sink. Her father didn't believe her, and she had no one else to turn to. She knew she had to find a way to protect him and herself from Seraphina, but she didn't know how. Determined to uncover the truth, Grace decided to investigate Seraphina further. She began to watch Seraphina's every move, noting the times when she would disappear into the forest or lock herself in her room. Grace also started reading old books from the village library, hoping to find some clue about Seraphina's true nature. One day, while browsing through a dusty old tome about magical creatures, Grace found a passage that described a type of serpent known as the Lamia. According to the book, Lamias were shape-shifting serpents who could take on human form. They were known for their mesmerizing eyes and their ability to control the minds of those around them. Grace's heart raced as she realized that Seraphina was a Lamia. She now had proof, but she needed a plan to expose Seraphina and protect her father. That night, Grace decided to confront Seraphina directly. She waited until her father had gone to bed and then sneaked into Seraphina's room. Seraphina was sitting at her vanity, brushing her long, dark hair. "Seraphina, I know what you are," Grace said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Seraphina turned slowly, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, do you now, little girl? You're a Lamia. I read about your kind in a book. You can't fool me anymore," Grace said, holding the book up as evidence. Seraphina's expression darkened, and she rose from her seat, her movements fluid and serpentine. "You're a clever girl, Grace, but you're playing a dangerous game." Grace stood her ground, determined not to show fear. "I won't let you hurt my father or anyone else." Seraphina's eyes flashed green, and she let out a low, menacing hiss. "Your father is under my control. There's nothing you can do to stop me." Grace felt a surge of desperation. She had to find a way to break Seraphina's hold over her father. She remembered a passage from the book that mentioned a powerful charm that could protect against a Lamia's influence. The next day, Grace set out to find the charm. She went to the village's wise woman, an old healer named Mother Elspeth. Mother Elspeth was known for her knowledge of ancient magic and her ability to create powerful charms and potions. Grace approached the wise woman's cottage, her heart pounding with hope and fear. She knocked on the door, and moments later, Mother Elspeth appeared, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "Well, well, what brings a young girl like you to my doorstep?" Mother Elspeth asked, her voice warm and inviting. Grace took a deep breath and explained her situation, telling Mother Elspeth everything about Seraphina and her true nature. The wise woman listened intently, her expression growing serious. "You are a brave girl, Grace," Mother Elspeth said. "It takes great courage to stand up to such a creature. I believe I can help you, but it will not be easy." Grace nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect my father." Mother Elspeth led Grace inside her cottage and began to prepare the charm. She gathered various herbs, crystals, and other magical ingredients, explaining each step to Grace as she worked. "This charm will protect you and your father from the Lamia's influence," Mother Elspeth said as she tied the final knot in the charm's cord. "Wear it around your neck, and make sure your father does the same." Grace thanked Mother Elspeth and hurried home, clutching the charm tightly in her hand. She knew that the hardest part was yet to come, convincing her father to wear the. That evening, Grace approached her father in the living room. "Daddy, I have something for you," she said, holding out the charm. Mr. Daniels looked at the charm skeptically. "What is this, Grace?" "It's a charm to protect you. Please just wear it for me," Grace pleaded, her eyes filled with desperation. Mr. Daniels sighed, seeing the worry in his daughter's eyes. He gently took the charm from her hand. "All right, Grace. I'll wear it if it makes you feel better." Grace smiled with relief as her father put the charm around his neck. She quickly placed her own charm around her neck, feeling a sense of hope for the first time in days. That night, as Grace lay in bed, she felt a strange sense of calm. She believed in the power of the charm and hoped it would protect her father from Seraphina's influence. The next morning, she noticed a change in her father. He seemed more like his old self, warm and affectionate, no longer distant and detached. Grace decided to test the charm's power. She carefully observed Seraphina throughout the day, noticing that Seraphina seemed unsettled. The woman would glance at Mr. Daniels with confusion and frustration, as if trying to reassert her control over him but failing. One evening, when her father was out, Grace decided to confront Seraphina again, this time with more confidence. She found Seraphina in the living room, staring into the fireplace. "Seraphina, your spell over my father is broken," Grace said firmly. "He wears a charm that protects him from your influence." Seraphina turned slowly, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You think a simple charm can protect you and your father from me?" Grace held her ground. "Yes, I do. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect him." With a furious hiss, Seraphina's eyes glowed green once more, but Grace remained calm, feeling the charm's protective power around her neck. Seraphina's attempts to intimidate her were. Grace knew that to truly protect her father and rid their home of Seraphina's presence, she needed to expose Seraphina's true nature to him. She devised a plan and waited for the right moment. One night, Grace overheard her father telling Seraphina he planned to spend the following evening away on business. Grace saw this as her opportunity. When her father returned the next evening, Grace met him at the door. "Daddy, you have to see something," she said urgently, leading him to Seraphina's room. Mr. Daniels was puzzled but followed his daughter. Grace pushed open the door just as Seraphina was in the midst of her transformation. Her scales glittered in the candlelight, and her eyes were a bright, venomous green. Mr. Daniels gasped, stepping back in horror. "Seraphina, what are you?" he stammered. The Lamia turned toward him, her expression filled with malevolence. "Foolish man," she hissed. "I am a Lamia, a serpent who takes what she desires. And I will not be thwarted by a mere child." But Mr. Daniels, now wearing the protective charm, felt a newfound strength. "You will not harm my daughter or anyone else," he declared, his voice steady and firm. Grace, feeling emboldened by her father's support, stepped forward. "You need to leave, Seraphina. You have no power over us anymore." With a final furious hiss, Seraphina transformed fully into her serpent form and slithered out the window, disappearing into the night. With Seraphina gone, Grace and her father began to rebuild their lives. Mr. Daniels realized how much he had neglected Grace in his grief and vowed to be there for her as he once was. They spent more time together, rediscovering the joy that had been missing from their lives. Grace felt a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. She had protected her father and their home from a powerful and dangerous creature, proving that even the smallest among us can be incredibly brave and strong. One sunny afternoon, Grace and her father visited Mother Elspeth to thank her for her help. The wise woman smiled warmly at Grace. "You have done well, child. Your courage and determination have saved your family." Grace felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had faced her fears and protected her loved ones. She knew that her mother would be proud of her. As they walked home, Mr. Daniels put his arm around Grace. "You are an incredible girl, Grace. Your mother would be so proud of you." Grace smiled, feeling her heart swell with love and pride. "Thank you, Daddy. I love you. And I love you, Grace." "Always," he replied, giving her a gentle squeeze. Grace knew that their journey was far from over, but with her father's love and support, she felt ready to face whatever challenges life might bring. Together, they would continue to build a life filled with love, laughter, and the memories of the ones they held dear. Thanks for watching. For more interesting stories, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.